Good evening, everybody. Once again, this is Ishbu, and I'm back at it with another How the Grandmasters Do It. Today's being Volskaya Foundry. So once again, if you missed the first one, the purpose of this guide is to give you a high-level meta overview of how Grandmasters and other top players approach these maps. Now, disclaimer, Here's the Storm is a game with a lot of diverse strategies, so what you see here may not be the best strategy all the time, and you may not see in all high-level games, but it is generally the foundation upon which all other strategies are built. Hence the metagame title. So, once again, today's is Volskaya Foundry. Let's get right into it. Okay, so Volskaya's Foundry is a map centered around extended team fights with a very weak objective. Team fighting and camp control are the biggest parts of winning Volskaya. So, unlike Sky Temple, this map is a very team fight-centric map, and specifically, while you're taking the camps, even the camps are meant to help you win team fights down the line. Because of this, and because of the fact that the objective really isn't that great at closing out the game, you can very easily scale and play into longer teamfight characters. So, going into some do's and don'ts. Take the heroes that can fight on the point well. Obviously, use the small, narrow choke points on the map's objective point to your advantage. Make sure you can have heroes that can take control of those areas. Don't take heroes that struggle in extended engages. So this is going to be your Uthers, your Monks, any burst healers or any burst damage dealers that are going to be struggling over the course of long engages. You usually want at least one source of DPS that can be constantly outputting. Same for any tanks or offlaners that struggle to, consistently provide a threat and keep themselves healthy. Take your turret camp on cooldown as much as possible. So the turret camp is probably one of the biggest parts of this map. If you can take your turret camp as soon as it's up as many times as possible, it will make your team fighting so much stronger and give you a lot of EXP. And finally, don't be stingy with the consumables and the turrets. If you are taking them very frequently, you're soon going to fill up on them, and I often see people dying without using them. Honestly, on any point fight or any fight over the top healing camp where you think your opponent can't leave, just drop it down basically as soon as you see the fight starting. They last a while, and even if the fight does stop, it might zone your opponent off long enough for you to take the objective for free. Alright, so some heroes you'll see going on those themes. The first one is the Scaling Team Fighter. So these heroes aren't great on every map, but this map specifically almost always seems to go long, so characters that take some time to scale up to 16 and 20 are super valuable. Kael'thas and Nazebo scale very well. Thrall Earthquake is really good on the point, and especially the level 20 Earthquake can be game-winning. And Zeratul always just needs a few levels to scale up, but really spikes around that 16 mark. Same with going down, the Sustain Healers. I talked about this earlier. You want healers that can have that can last a while and can provide a lot of healing over time. You're not necessarily as concerned about the burst. Also worth mentioning that healers like Ana and Malfurion are a lot safer on this map than others because they can fight really close to their own gates if they need to for the first two objectives. Next up is Zone Controllers. So these are characters that control space very well and can cut off the chokes to getting onto the objective point very well. I hope it's pretty self-explanatory, and you might be surprised to see Gazlo until you realize he's really strong right now, and you might actually be seeing a lot more at high levels than you think. And finally, Objective Destroyers. Now, if you have Tychus or Malthael, if your opponent gets the robot early, it is basically trivial because these guys can melt it so fast that the robot will struggle to get any value. Medivh is very similar. He doesn't destroy it as fast, though, but the big thing about Medivh is if the opponent gets the robot early, he's basically guaranteed to be able to finish the Master's Touch on it, which is a huge power spike for him, and it does do a lot of damage while he's doing it. Okay, so starting right into the game, you'll recognize the map and the little diagram from last time. You've got a standard 1-4 split going on here, where the 4-man is just going to be rotating between the top two lanes. Nothing too fancy here, off-laners in the bot lane. Main reasons for this is just it's a lot faster to rotate between the top lanes, and also, notably, the heal camp will spawn at 1 minute, and you don't want to have your 4-man in the bot lane at that time because it could lose to you this heal camp, which is really valuable. Moving on to the next, at 1 minute, both teams usually will split to send someone off to go take their turret camp. As I said, taking this thing off cooldown is very, very important for this map. Now, it is worth mentioning, if you're too predictable about this, sometimes your opponent will just stay top, take the heal camp, and cheese you while you're doing this, and then you have to try and contest their turret camp, and they basically get a 2 camp for 1 trade. But that is a very rare and risky maneuver. Most of the time, people just branch off and take their turret camp. Now, once again, if you are slow at taking your turret camp, the other team can take theirs and then contest yours, so be punctual with this. Also worth mentioning, You're going to notice these two up here. This is just to catch all the soak, but I'm going to say this right now. It is very important that one of your DPS in this game can clear waves very effectively. That means a Kael'thas, a Nazebo, a Tassadar, a Junkrat, something like that that can just go top and clear waves, because you're going to see a lot of rotating in and off the point to clear other waves. And it's very nice in this map to have someone like that. Alright, 230. I didn't really know what to call this camp. Normally we call this camp the Goats, but it's skinned to be robots on this map. So people call it either the robots or the throwers, or sometimes even easy camp. But same thing you're probably familiar with if you saw the Sky Temple one. 230, you just want to get these camp going so that it can be pushing top, so that when the objective's going, the camp is here pushing against each other. So basically just creating a conflict of interest for the enemy team. Nothing too fancy here, it's just a standard camp rotation. Next up is, okay, the first captured point. First captured point spawns at 3 minutes. If your camps are pushing, both teams are going to have to send someone up because these little thrower camps can get a lot of value if uncontested. So what you're going to see a lot here is tanks sitting on the point, healers throwing heals at them, a DPS throwing damage back and forth from within the lane, and then a DPS rotating between mid and top, and then the offlaners rotating between mid and bot. Now, importantly, there is this conveyor belt in the mid that goes up, meaning if an offlaner can push in, get the advantage, and rotate up here, their rotation will be super fast and super threatening on the enemy tank. So offlaners getting priority during this phase is huge. Also worth mentioning, this phase, the way top-level players typically play it, it typically goes long enough that another turret camp will spawn. So, when this does, sending people down to get the turret camp can often be worth it. Now, the reason I'm showing very few people actually contesting it, and I haven't really talked much about the robot itself, is because, as I said, the objective is very weak. This first robot is basically only going to get like a wall, like usually about 2 walls is considered a good first robot, and that's very little in the current metagame of Heroes of the Storm. Anything that doesn't even just take a fort is generally not worth missing soak for. So make sure you are getting a lot of soak here. It's okay to give up this objective. Obviously, if you are a weaker comp, it's still good to stall it out as much as possible, just so you can get those levels up to scale up to a point where your team really starts to spike. But this first objective, this is generally what you're going to see. Okay, we've now got the robot. The team on the left, the blue team, has got the robot. What did they do with their robot? And you're going to notice he's very cute and harmless. Frankly, there's only 2 ways to die to the robot right now. The first is to stand on the little laser when it does the secondary explosion, and the second is to get machine gunned down and not realize you're dying. But as long as you're getting healed, the robot will struggle to kill you. It's not a very threatening objective, at least the first one isn't. The first robot, what you want to do is go mid, take the mid wall. Go top, take the top wall, take the top well. Now the important thing here is because the second objective is going to spawn on the top, taking this wall and this well will make this fight much harder for the enemy team. Usually you're not going to see a big EXP difference off the first robot, but you can at least set yourself up to take the second one better. Also worth mentioning, the team that gets the robot usually is going to hit 10 first, and because you're already up here, hitting 10 first will allow you to take the heal camp after the robot dies, usually pretty uncontested, which will give you another advantage into the next fight. Okay. The period between the first and the second capture point is pretty free. There's a lot of different options. The only real big thing is take your turret camp off cooldown as much as possible. But once it spawns, now we're getting into a protector that actually can kind of do some stuff, and especially you need to hold this point because the heal camp is still very valuable. So typically what you're going to see is, once again, a team fight where the tanks stand on the point and the DPS more stand towards the lane side so that they can't get trapped. Offlaners are going to be clearing these 2 waves and then rotating when they can. Usually this fight will happen around level 13, or more often when one team is 13 and not 12, and the other team is 12. So if you're the team that's 12 in that case, keep your offlaner soaking, maybe send someone down to help, get your 13, then look for the fight. But usually this is a pretty straightforward fight, not much to cover here. And finally, whichever team gets the second robot, you're going to want to book it straight down to the bot lane for the same reason we took the first one top. You want to kill this wall, you want to kill this well, and if possible, you want to kill this fort. That is because the last objective, or the third round of objective, will be this bottom point. So doing this will once again secure your ability to fight this a lot safer. Also worth mentioning, don't let the enemy take your fort. A lot of teams will try to all in this, especially if you go for the heal camp. At some point, just to make things even, don't let them take this. But once again, you're going to take the robot all the way from top and just run it straight bot is the most common way of using it. So after this, the game is once again pretty wide open. There's not really a set path. You just kind of do whatever you can to win from here, and we'll cover some routes to win right now. So if you are ahead, the best ways to close out a game are first, stockpile turrets and heal camps as much as possible. The more you have of these, the harder it is for the enemy team to win fights. Also, they're just worth a lot of EXP, so they can be a great way of even furthering your lead. 2, we just covered this, but kill enemy wells in the lane where the next fight is, and keep your wells alive where the next fight will be. Don't let people snipe your wells if you're about to fight in that lane. Especially the top and the bottom wells are going to be the most valuable here. The bottom being the most valuable, because the best window to end a game on Volskaya, if you are ahead, is on the third capture point. So the third capture point usually hits when one team is 20 and the other is still 18 to 19. If you can capture it while still holding this 20 to 19 or a lead, this is your best window to close out the game. You run the protector straight up bottom with a 20 lead, try to win a fight, or just if they ignore you long enough, just use the robot to end the game. But this is the best window to end. If you can't end on the third capture point, the game is going to get to a point where both teams are 20, and it's hard to really use your advantage at that point. And finally, tips for coming back. So first thing, as I said, especially the first and even the second objective, don't feel pressured to fight them. Soak off lanes as much as possible. Do as much as you can to stay even in the EXP. It is okay if you are losing walls. It is even okay if you start losing forts. The big thing here is going to be that third objective fight, and especially around the 16 to 20 spikes. A lot of teams that get drafted on this map will spike in that late game, and as long as they're soaking, they won't fall that far behind. Obviously, take your turret as much as possible on cooldown, just so that the enemy team doesn't see it and run over it and have time to contest it. If you're taking your turret on cooldown, it's much harder for the enemy team to contest you on it. Protect your bottom keep wall. So obviously, you're probably going to lose your bottom fort wall to the second Punisher, but if you can keep your bottom keep wall, the third Punisher won't be as much of an end condition. It will be much harder for it to end. And then finally, just be patient. This objective, this game is not very early. This map is not very early game focused. Even if you're not able to fight, just soak off lanes. Just stall as much as possible. Don't give up too many kills. Don't give up too much camp EXP. You will scale up and hit to a point where your team will come online. But you don't need to feel rushed in this map. This is not a map where it's very easy to close out if you are ahead, as you can probably hear from the closing out when ahead section. So that is my final point. We will be stopping here. Thank you for joining me. As always, here are my socials. You can follow me on Twitter or Twitch. I don't stream a ton. But if you are looking for good gameplay, go ahead and look at the HeroesHearthCCL. They're going to be drafting this weekend, and it's going to be some high-level gameplay from Grandmasters and former pro players from Europe, Korea, and NA, all going to be in this draft. So, anyways, this has been Ishbu. Hope you have a nice day, and peace out.